Greetings and salutations. This is Michael Govier from the First Day Podcast, and you are listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 280, movies you only need to watch once. Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. We're back. We took a week off. Derek and I were busy at a Comic-Con together recently, but we'll get to that, I'm sure. This week, we're going to be taking a look at movies that you only need to watch once. Like good movies, but, once is enough, to watch them. So this will be interesting. But before we get to that, Derek, what is new in the world of pop culture for you, my friend?
Hey, Chris. Well, I had a chance to watch a few things. Like you said, we were off last week. I was at the hockey game, so I had a little bit of time. I had a chance to finish, and I may have mentioned this on a previous show, so I won't dwell on it. I finished watching the second season of the show Reacher. That's based on the character Jack Reacher. Season 2 dropped on Amazon around Christmas, right after Christmas. So I finally had a chance to finish watching that. I really enjoyed it. So those who watched season 1, season 2, more of the same. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And then I had a chance to watch two movies, a new one and an old one. I sort of teased this up last week. Last time we did our show, I mentioned that I had watched Equalizer 2 because I knew that Equalizer 3 was coming out on the streamers.
That's the Denzel Washington one you were telling me about. First time he's ever done a sequel in his career.
Right.
Stood out to me.
Right. Yeah. So this is a sequel to the sequel. This is part 3.
Okay.
So it dropped last weekend. My wife and I had a chance to watch it. We liked it. It's very much like the first two. Like I said on the last show, Denzel Washington, great actor, one of the greatest actors of our generation. This guy knows how to make a movie. And even though he's getting up there, he's a little bit older. The way this character is written, it makes sense that an older character plays it. They don't have him doing ridiculous. Well, they do have him doing ridiculous things, but not like superhero ridiculous things that a person of his age should have no business doing. So no, it was good. I really enjoyed it. Equalizer 3 was good. And then since, Denzel Washington, I also had a chance to watch the movie Philadelphia. Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington.
Oh, nice. From 93. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Tom Hanks' first Oscar. Yeah.
Indeed. And part of the reason that I watched this was, as I mentioned before, one of my favorite podcasts other than ours is the Rewatchables on the Ringer Podcast Network. And so they just did the movie Philadelphia on their show a couple of like this week or last week. And when I saw it drop on their episodes, I was like, oh, Philadelphia. Well, I think I know that movie well enough. I could probably just listen to the episode. That very night, it was on Turner Classic Movies. So I'm like, well, you know what? Let's get a 2-hour refresher. So I enjoyed the movie, watching it again, and now I've got a 2-hour podcast to go and listen to. So I'm going to get 4 hours of quality entertainment out of this movie. But yeah, if you haven't seen Philadelphia, definitely check it out. And if you haven't seen it in a while, it's good, but some of the homophobia that's in there it's obviously of its time and accurate for its time, but it was harder to watch than I remember. I guess over time, what starts to become more socially acceptable when you go back and see a movie where it was clearly not, not as socially acceptable, the way that people talk about it, it was pretty bad. And then I had a chance to watch a documentary.
For 40 days and 40 nights, he watches documentaries. He likes to learn about the world. It's Derek's Documentaries. Derek's Documentaries.
Please share.
So I was on Amazon Prime, and as it often does, the algorithm says, hey, we know what you like. What about this?
Yeah,
and so when I was
out.
scrolling through the documentary section, it gave me a documentary called Dear Mr. Watterson. And that name may sound familiar to you because Bill Watterson is the creator of the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh, yes.
And so it's a little bit older. The documentary is about 10 years old, but it is readily available on Amazon Prime. And it's a look at the comic strip, the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, from its idea, the conception, how Bill Watterson came to, he was a cartoonist before he created these characters, and sort of his arc of getting into the field in the industry, and then the run of the comic strip and its huge influence. And it also talked about how he never sold the commercial rights to these characters. Like, you have the Peanuts gang that you can buy pretty much anything you can imagine, from action figures and plushies and T-shirts and lunch pails and anything and everything that has, say, Snoopy or Charlie Brown on it. And you even see like those characters hawking things like MetLife commercials. Like, there's a lot of merchandising money to be made from popular comics and cartoons. Watterson had no desire to do any of that. He retained the rights 100%, and they never made toys or T-shirts or anything other than the comic strips and the books. So it was a really interesting look at this this intellectual property, and how somebody who you know they captured lightning in a bottle and chose to do a certain way to keep the integrity of these characters. He didn't want, like they were saying, come on, you could have had a Hobbs stuffed tiger thing for sale for kids. You would have sold and made $1 million. And he's like, I'm already doing well enough. I don't, you know, he felt it would cheapen and lessen his intellectual property. So
very cool.
It was kind of refreshing to hear that, but at the same time, you can sense the frustration from some of the partners and some of the fans. And unfortunately, they don't actually get to interview him at all because he's very reclusive and he doesn't make public appearances. So it's a lot of people that have worked with him and his peers in the cartooning industry, and people who are like archivists for newspapers and libraries and things of that nature. So there was still an interesting cross-section of people that got to contribute to this documentary. And if you are a fan of the comic strip, I think you'll enjoy it. It only runs about an hour, and no, it was quite good. It's called Dear Mr. Watterson. So
and you obviously were a fan of the comic strip, I'm assuming.
I was, yeah. And like so many people, it was like I wasn't really a person who read the daily newspaper at that point. Like, this would have been the mid 80s to early 90s, but they collected them in various books and anthologies. And that's how a lot of the people being interviewed, especially a lot of the young people.
Me too. That's how I got to know it.
That's how they got into it. And yeah, no, it was fascinating. And even just hearing them talk about it and looking at some of the strips, and they say like the things that he was writing about in the late 80s and early 90s that are depicted in these comic strips are still just as relevant today, because they're very broad topics that are very easily applicable to all walks of life. So if you haven't read your Calvin and Hobbes in a while, it might be worth going back, taking another look.
That's a good point. Like for me, it was always like just the simple concept of this kid with this wicked imagination who has a stuffed tiger, and when no one else is around, the tiger comes to life and talks to him, like, or he just talks to it, right, with his imagination. But the fact is, like, it was always about reflecting on like life and stuff. It was very deep. It was so good. Oh my God.
Yeah. Watterson was a lot more intelligent than people probably gave him credit for. And yeah, there's a lot of satire. There's a lot of social commentary in there that you might not have picked up on when you were first reading it, because if you were like me, I was a teenager, like a lot of it probably went over my head, but seeing it, some of it analyzed in this documentary, it really sort of opened my eyes a bit. I'm going to go back and read it because I still have a few of those anthologies in the bookshelf.
I like how you mentioned too, how he never commercialized it and never put it into like, you know, dolls or action figures or things like that. But lots of intellectual properties have done that. And I'm glad that they have. Yeah. Because this past weekend, you and I actually had the opportunity to get together and go to a Comic-Con together. Actually, it was sort of a Comic-Con on one side, and then the other side was like a toy and collectible show. Man, let me tell you, I had myself a good time. It was so fun. Oh my gosh.
The best time you've had with your clothes on all year.
Yeah, exactly. So the Comic-Con part, I was like, you know, that's not really my thing. I'm not a big comic. You're a big comic guy. I'm not a big comic guy. I got a couple
of real old Batmans. The guy gave me a deal, but they were still really expensive.
Oh, yeah. I saw you spending the money there. And it was funny because I saw this older couple. You were like bartering with the guy there for the comics. And I saw this couple. They were a little bit older, and they were like around the corner of this guy's booth. And they were looking at a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, I wonder what they're looking at. And they stepped out for a minute. So I went in there, and it was like old Mad magazines. And then like the Marvel super specials of the movies. Like, this is the stuff I like. They didn't have any of the Mad magazines I wanted. Wasn't into it. But then I was going through the super specials and stuff, and the movie adaptations, and I found one, like, and there was like Raiders of the Lost Ark, like $60, and all these other ones that are like, you know, expensive or whatever. And then there was one, it was Xanadu. and it was $10. So like nobody wanted it. So I took it. I'm like, oh, I'm buying this. I didn't even know it existed. So I bought it, and it was so funny because then I got it and I came around and paid for it, put it in my bag, whatever. And then I noticed a couple goes back and I see them looking, and then they're like, I can see them kind of frantically looking through the box. I think I stole her Xanadu. I think the look on their face was like, where'd it go? Like, who would take this? Like, nobody here would take it. Well, I took it. And the other thing, I was really lucky because I was able to really fill out my Empire Strikes Back card collection. So that was great. I got a full set of Battlestar Galactica cards, and I almost finished the original 12 Star Wars figures. I did really well. I really had a good time. Oh my God, it was so weird.
Score. Huge nerd.
Yeah, that's what my wife said when I got back. She's like, oh my God, are you a nerd? I'm like, of course I am. And that's why I do these.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
Oh, I got one for you. Derek, why did Ricardo Montalban struggle to find roles after Star Trek II?
Oh my God. I don't know. Why?
Because nobody wanted to hire an ex-con.
Okay, that was pretty good. You got me with that one.
Is that a pledge pin on your uniform?
Doctor.
Doctor. Detroit. Oh, yes, the Haile Selassie Pavilion. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Whiskey.
Fun prophylactic, soiled.
Bring him home.
You're my friend. I'm going to try and help you.
Randy Jackson from the Jackson 5.
Really?
In Philadelphia, it's worth $50. Stop. Look at that escargot. Okay, so like we said, this week we're going to take a look at movies that you only need to watch one time. That's it. But before we get into that, Derek, did you want to set some parameters for how we went about our list? Because we don't share our lists to each other. We send them to a third party, but we don't know what each other is going to come up with. But what sort of parameters did you put on your list? I know what I did for mine.
Well, I mean, it wasn't even so much parameters as much it was like I started to realize as I was doing a little bit of the homework and trying to put a list together, there's a few kinds of movies, a few categories, if you will, that I think everything on our list is going to fall into. It was like you had things like a horror movie like that was just so graphic you literally could only watch it once, or you had like a movie, a whodunit mystery, or a movie with a twist ending where it's like, well, once you know the ending, there's not really a lot of value in watching it a second time. So you had that, but then you also had ones that were like, this movie is a masterpiece of art. It's, maybe it stars someone who had their signature role, or a film creator, writer, producer, director that was like, this was the pinnacle of their career. But often these movies are things, they're often very long. They can often be very boring. It's usually long, boring dramas, as my wife likes to say. And so it's like ones where, as any self-respecting pop culture aficionado or film student would be like, well, you can't say that you are I guess you wouldn't be well watched if you haven't seen these. But again, it's like, well, I don't think I need to see it 5 times. I think once is more than enough, and then I can literally just check it off on my mental list and say, yeah, I've seen that. So those were sort of the kinds of parameters I know that I found I was looking at. And what I did realize was when I was checking, because apparently this is a topic that a lot of people have covered before. So I found a lot of top 10 lists online, and a lot of movies kept showing up over and over and over again on people's lists. And I imagine rightly so. The challenge is, I had seen a lot of the movies that seemed to really fit into this category. Many of them are like horror movies, which I'm not a big fan of the horror genre. So, it made sense to me that I hadn't seen any of those. But some of them are just like really sad, really depressing. Maybe they're about a topic that is just, difficult to watch. And it's not to say that these movies aren't good. It's not to say that there isn't a good reason to that these film creators, they obviously made the movie for a reason. They wanted to maybe draw awareness to some social issue or something of that sense. But if I hadn't seen it, I couldn't talk about it. So as you mentioned, we don't know what is on each other's lists, but we use, as we often do, we had my wife be sort of the neutral arbitrator to make sure there was no overlap. I put together a list of some movies that people might expect to be on one or both of our lists that neither one of us have seen, so they're not going to be on there. So I'm just going to list a couple of them right now, just sort of as a spoiler, but also sort of so you're not listening going, well, this definitely has to be your number one and number two. It's like, well, if I haven't seen it, I can't have it on.
So sorry, these are movies that you haven't seen.
These are movies that
but normally would be on a list.
That were on a lot of the lists, and they're not on your. All I know is they're not on your list. You're going to talk about tonight, and I guess for some of them it's probably the same thing. I imagine you haven't seen them, and a couple of these are foreign films as well, so that might be part of it. So it's things like Requiem for a Dream, The Human Centipede, Dancer in the Dark, Audition, Midsummer, Manchester by the Sea. Like these are movies that were on almost all the lists. I haven't seen any of them, so unfortunately, I haven't seen them. I didn't put them on the list. So I don't know. Had you seen any of those movies, Chris?
Well, I think like you, I wanted to avoid movies that I haven't seen, and I haven't seen any of those ones you mentioned. The other thing I wanted to avoid were like what I would call like great movies that, I just didn't like. I mean, there's some like, here's an example, Chinatown. It is considered one of the greatest American films ever made, but I didn't really care for it all that much.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't think it was like
see, and I've seen it like 6 or 7 times. Again, that's a detective movie where once you know who did it, I can understand why you maybe don't want to go back and watch it again.
I mean, there's like you think about movies like, for me, like Meatballs and My Bodyguard and Stripes. I've seen them all like 18 million times, but there's some movies I'm just one and done with.
Yeah.
But so before we get into that, I have a question for you because I like watching movies over and over again, the same ones, as you know. Surprise, surprise. So I'm wondering, like, what do you think makes a movie rewatchable versus one that's not rewatchable that is tonight's topic?
Well, again, sort of put me on the spot, but I think that for a movie to be rewatchable, it has to be entertaining, which is not to say that these one and done movies aren't entertaining, but I think for the most part, we're going to find the pretty heavy topics or they're pretty long. So it's got to be entertaining. You've got to get a certain sense of enjoyment out of it. Again, if you're watching a long, sprawling epic that features a huge cast of characters, that might be tough to watch a couple of times through. If you're not really clicking with it, you want memorable characters, memorable quotes usually. And honestly, I find that the kind of movies I tend to want to rewatch have, I think of them sort of more like popcorn movies. Like I'm entertained. If it's a comedy, it's got lots of good jokes that continue to be funny. If it's a good action or a sci-fi movie, there's good sequences that you just want to that draw you back into it. There's just the simple, hey, 4 people in this movie were nominated for Academy Awards. Like these people are at the top of their ability. Sometimes that's enough too. So I don't know. There's lots of reasons why a movie could be rewatchable.
So one reason that would make it not rewatchable would it be length of the movie? Like a super, super long movie, might fall into this category, I would think, just, off the top of my head. You mentioned a couple of, examples of movies that might fall into this category, and a bunch of them are on my list, like things like a horror movie or like a twist ending or that sort of thing. But what about long movies like that are super, super long? You're like, I just don't need to watch it again because it was like 3 hours long.
Well, and so I'll give you an example again. I know this isn't on either of our list because I asked you before we put it on the pod. I almost put on my list Lawrence of Arabia from the 1960s. It's considered one of the very best American films ever made. It's a sprawling epic. It's the cinematography and the way the movie is shot is unlike anything you've ever seen before. And if anyone has the opportunity to see it in the theater, I would strongly recommend it. I myself have only seen it one time. I saw it on a 60-inch flat screen, high definition 4K. Like it looked amazing. But that was it. I only ever had to watch it the one time. And like I said earlier, now when someone says, have you seen this movie? Yes, I have. Then they're not looking down their nose at me going, how could you call yourself a movie guy if you've never seen Lawrence of Arabia? It's like, I have. So that's in some cases going to be a detriment. But then you have a movie like The Godfather. Like that's what, 3.5 hours? I've probably seen it 20 times. Like that one, the length is not a problem for me. But again, I think it's just different things appeal to an audience. So.
All right. So we decided to put together a top 5 list of movies that you only need to see once. Why don't you kick us off? We'll start at number 5 like we usually do. Work our way up to number 1. Your number 5 movie you only need to see once is?
Yeah, I tried to pick some newer movies as well because I figured you're probably going to have a lot of older ones on your list. Figure. So this is the old. I have 2 from the 90s and then 3 from the 2000s. So this is one of my 2 from the 90s. It's the 1995 film Leaving Las Vegas.
Oh, so that's a good one, actually. Yeah, I saw it once too. Yeah.
Yeah, this stars Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue. They were both nominated for an Oscar for lead performance. Nicolas Cage won, which is part of the reason that I think you need to watch this. These performances are outstanding. For those who haven't seen it or maybe are not as familiar with it, because it is a little bit older now, Nicolas Cage plays a character who basically is at the end of his rope, and he goes from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and he decides, that's it, I'm going to end my life here this weekend. He's suffered a lot of personal and professional hardship, and he basically picks up a shopping cart full of alcohol and just drinks himself to death over the weekend while he's in Vegas. And the movie is the 2 days following from the time he gets there to the time, spoiler, that he dies. I mean, and along the way, early in the film, he runs into Elizabeth Shue, her character is a prostitute and who is also not living her best life. And they find that, they sort of have some things in common, and they pair up. The movie focuses a lot on loneliness and despair and alcoholism, which, despair and alcoholism usually go hand in hand. It looks at different forms of dependency. And it's I want to read a quote here I pulled up when I was doing my homework here. This was something Roger Ebert wrote about this movie when we were talking about the themes. He says, "Leaving Las Vegas is not a love story, although it feels like one, but a story about two desperate people using love as a form of prayer and a last resort against their pain. It is also a sad, trembling portrait of the final stages of alcoholism." Like, this movie is a tough watch. It is somebody who just falls deeper and deeper and deeper into the despair that alcoholism brings. And anyone who has experienced this kind of thing themselves, whether firsthand, personally, or through, within a family member, alcoholism is something that a lot of people can relate to in the worst possible ways. And this movie, it's a tough subject to have to sit through for 2 hours, but the performances are going to blow you away. And again, it's with a lot of these movies that are sort of hard to watch, you're hopefully after you watch it, you learn something or you have a little bit of self-reflection. And I think that's one of these ones that, again, I saw it in 95 when it came out. I have not seen it since then. And but I do remember enjoying the movie from a film point of view, but also sort of being blown away by just the portrayal of these people that just were in this situation. The way that Nicolas Cage just portrays this alcoholic in the last 2 days of his life is just, the self-loathing, the self-punishment. It's just crazy. So this is the number 5 on my list, Leaving Las Vegas.
That's a good one. And like you, I saw it once, and I thought it was fantastic. I thought the performances were great. Elizabeth Shue was great. She was like a revelation in that, because I would think of her as, like Karate Kid and stuff, like a little bit more like lighthearted stuff. But she was wonderful. It was good. But again, don't need to see it again. I'm good. I saw it. No, it was great. And move on.
And another reason that you may only want to see it once is it's like, this was in my opinion, this was Nicolas Cage at his very best. And everything he's done since then was just cashing a paycheck. And believe me, I find him in some cases very entertaining. I like The Rock. I like Con Air. Like, he's done some stuff that I have watched over and over again and that I've enjoyed. But man, oh man, this guy must pump out 5, 6, 7 movies a year. He is literally just phoning it in and cashing a check. But it's because of the amazing work he did in this that he's continued to work for 30 years. He's clearly talented. Mm-hmm. If you just think of Nicolas Cage as a has-been and you've never seen this, go back and watch this and you'll realize how talented he really was in his prime.
Mm-hmm. It was good. Okay, my number 5, maybe a bit of a surprise. I'm going to start off with a new movie. Okay, it came out in 2022. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That's my movie.
Wow.
Yep.
You only want to watch that once?
Yeah. And here's I know you love this movie too. And I thought it was great. But there's just so much going on in this movie. You'd think it would take multiple viewings to sort of properly appreciate it all, take it all in. But for me, I'm good. I saw it once. That's all I need. First of all, it's really long. And like I said, there's a lot going on. It starts out, you think it's like a bit of a character study of kind of what it's like to be an immigrant family in America. And then it just takes this sort of sharp left turn, and it's this fantasy where, they travel through time and space and other universes and stuff. The performances are amazing. Michelle Yeoh and Kiwi Kwan and Jamie Lee Curtis, it's directed so well, but I don't need to see it again. I've seen it once. I've experienced it. I'm good. So I don't know. I know you disagree because you could watch it multiple times and get different things out of it. Me, I'm like, I'm good. I've seen it once. I'm going to move on. So that's my number 5.
Wow, that's...
You really disagree.
I'm surprised. Number one, I'm surprised you picked something so new.
It's fresh in my mind because, I just watched it about a year ago, my wife and I. I'm like, I enjoyed it, but I'm like, I'm good. I would never watch it again.
See, we watched it in the theater, and then when it came out on DVD, Blu-ray, we bought that and I watched it again, and I enjoyed it just as much the second time around. This is one of those ones where, because there was so much going on, I actually wanted to go back and watch it a second time to try and pick up on some of those nuances and little things you might have missed the first time around. And I think it's one of those ones that, given a little bit more time, I'm going to want to go back and see it again. But I mean, I get it. This movie is clearly not a for everybody kind of movie, but movie wins the Oscar for Best Picture and sweeps the awards like it did. It's got something going for it. So I think this is definitely falls in the category of everyone should see it at least once. Whether or not it's one and done, that's up for debate. But
it's everything, everywhere, only once. That's what I'll name it.
Wow.
So, okay, so number 4 for you. What do you got?
All right, I'm going to also go very recent here. Okay. This is a movie that I'm guessing very few of our listeners actually watched, and so that's why I thought I needed to include it. It's from 2020, and the movie is called The Father. It stars Anthony Hopkins, who won an Oscar for Best Lead Actor, Olivia Colman, Rufus Sewell. There's a lot of people.
Olivia Colman. She's the one from that Broadchurch show.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember her. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Look, I know something new. There you go.
She's won a couple. I think she was nominated for this one as well. I'm not sure if she won it or not. It won 2 Oscars. Let me just click on and check. But in any case, so this movie, for those who haven't seen it, this is going to appeal to different people for different reasons, depending on how old you are. So it's about an elderly gentleman who's in his 80s, played by Anthony Hopkins, who is suffering from dementia. And it's a very interesting and creative way to tell a story about the person who is themselves suffering from dementia and the people around them who are their family and their support system and their loved ones, and how it affects them as well. Olivia Colman did win an Oscar as well.
Oh, so there you go.
Yeah. So this one, the movie is told in a very broken way, where although it mainly takes place in one apartment, like I think it was based on a stage play, so it's got only a couple of locations. The time frame continues to jump backwards and forwards to represent the dementia that the main character is suffering from, where he feels lost and he feels like he's in an unfamiliar place, and he doesn't believe what people are telling him, because 5 minutes ago this person was a child, and then now they're an adult saying, no, I'm your daughter, I'm this old, and you're like, no, my daughter's 6, I just saw her. And then an hour later she's 6 again, and like the way that it just bounces back and forth, it really looks at the idea of aging and this mental illness of dementia, and just the toll it takes. And as someone, we are all getting older, but as someone who now, I have aging parents, not that either of them are suffering from dementia, but my grandparents had mental illness and dementia. So, I'm hoping that my parents don't go through that. But I've heard from other people who, as they start to take care of their elderly parents and they themselves start to get older, these are real concerns. And it can be so difficult, not just on the people who are suffering from it, but the people around them. And this movie, I think, does a really good job of trying to explain it in an artistic way and in a somewhat entertaining way. And the performances are next level, like so good. But it also it's very sad, and because this very well could be a situation that you find yourself in, as either the role of the children in this film that are there trying to take care of their elderly father, or of the father himself, who doesn't realize that he's suffering from this and is just confused. It's a really, really good movie that I think flew under the radar because it came out in 2020 during the pandemic. So it had very, very limited exposure in the theater. And I think it sort of came and went to the streamers quite quickly. But when people start winning Oscars for movies, you shouldn't forget about them. If you haven't already seen it, I don't think I need to see this one again. It was a very sad, very depressing movie, just again, because it hit home a little bit closer for me than maybe others. But Super, super good. Very well done. I think everyone does need to see this, but I think once is enough. It's called The Father. It came out in 2020.
That's a good one. So I surprised you a bit with my first one because it was a newer movie, which I usually don't do. So this one, I'm going to go way back. I'm going to surprise you actually with an older movie. It's from 50 years ago because we reviewed it here on the podcast at the beginning of last season. And it's The Exorcist.
Oh, okay.
So because we wanted to go back and watch that movie last year, it was the first time I really had a chance to watch it. Obviously, one of the most famous horror films of all time. A lot of shocking moments in it. You think about some of the stuff that goes on, like the crucifix and grabbing her mom and the barfing and the head spinning and all that stuff. But the thing that got me too was that in that angiography scene, with the blood squirting out everywhere at her neck. That's the scene that had people vomiting and like leaving the theater back in 73 when it came out. You know, there's so much going on. There's so many, things that just are shocking in it. It's a classic. It's probably one of the most influential films ever made. One of the most famous movies, that's for sure. But I think I only need to see this once. I'm good. It's not a movie I would go back and rewatch again. Again, for a lot of those shocking moments, I think the impact they have is when you see them for the first time. It's like, wow. If I saw them again, I'd be like, yeah, it wouldn't have that same impact for me. So I think that The Exorcist is one of those movies I would not watch a second time. I've seen it once. It's a classic. I'm good. I'm moving on. And so that's number 4 on my list. So.
Nice. Yeah, no, good pick. No, I agree. I like you. Yeah, I think once was enough for me for that one as well. So
number 3.
All right, I'm going to go with the most obvious one that I think everybody, when you ask them this, is going to jump to, and that's 1993 Steven Spielberg, Schindler's List.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
arguably one of the most celebrated and talented directors of our generation. I mean, he's done so many things to be remembered for, and you want to talk about a year in a life. You put out Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year. Like, there are directors that would kill to have those two movies and those two movies alone on their resume, but to put them out in the same year is just amazing. Like, I can't get over just the things that must have had to align for that to come together for him. But
so many of his other movies you could watch over and over, like Raiders and Jaws and E.T. You could watch them over and over. Jurassic Park, over and over and over and over again, but not that one. Good point.
No. So this falls into some of the categories we talked about. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes, so it's long. It's about a very depressing topic, being the Holocaust. But at the same time, it's a topic that it's important that people are educated on and don't forget, right? It's like you always say, those who forget history are destined to make the same mistakes. And like, this is something that, as horrific as it was, we can't afford to forget. And I think that's a big part of why Spielberg made this movie is for that reason. It obviously explores the themes of good and evil, the idea that, even a single man can do the right thing when faced with, the most difficult obstacles, and have a positive outcome in an area that would otherwise have been full of despair. But it also does focus on the actual the Jews that are in it, and the idea of hope and faith in times of despair, and how even when things are at their literal absolute worst, hope and faith can help you survive or persevere. And I mean, I'm sure I'm not doing this movie justice by simplifying it this much. If you haven't seen it, it's a tough watch. And I know a lot of people my age had to watch it for school, for a history class or sociology class. And that's how a lot of people saw it, is I remember they did outings to the theater to see it, because this movie, in addition to this very difficult and sensitive topic, is a literal masterpiece of filmmaking. And like this, Spielberg won the Oscar, and rightly so. Like this is the best thing he's ever done, and the best thing he will ever do. And I'm sure he would say that himself. So for that reason, and the performances, right? You have Liam Neeson and Ben Kingsley and Ralph Fiennes. Like, these people are again giving their best work, and it's just a merging of so many artists coming together to do this movie, to make this film, this important film. And it's like that. It's like I said, Have I seen it? Yes, I saw it once. I did it. I literally did it in one sitting. I'm well, proud. I guess it's not really something to be proud of, but I'm proud to say I have seen it. I watched it once. I did it one sitting. It was an emotional roller coaster. Like, if you're not changed after you see this movie, like, there's something wrong with you. And but that's it. One and done for me for this one. I don't have to watch this again.
We reviewed it on the podcast, right?
I didn't. Maybe you and Yancey might have.
I thought maybe we did. Or maybe it was just that you kept talking it up and I'd never seen it. So I went back and I actually watched it. But I agree with you. Like, I saw it once. I'm good. Like, I mean, it was great and everything. But, I don't think I'd want to watch it again. That's a good pick. I think that's pretty good. All right. My number 3, I'm going with a movie from 1980, because I like to go back.
Shocking.
I know. And it's The Elephant Man. Have you ever seen it, Derek?
I've actually seen that one multiple times. I had to watch it for a film class.
So I'm picking it not just because it's sad, but I mean, there's a lot of reasons. And the thing is, like, Mel Brooks produced this movie. And although he was uncredited in the original theatrical release, so that the audiences didn't think it would be a comedy. And this is an interesting one because I saw this movie in the theater when it came out. I was 10 years old. And I went to see this movie because I heard about it. I thought, I want to go see this. And I loved film right from when I was a little kid. So I went and I saw it. And I have not seen it since, nor do I really care to see it again. And it's not because it's not good. It was fantastic. John Hurt's best performance by far. And obviously it's a true story. It's based on Joseph Merrick's life. They call him John Merrick in the film. Yeah. And directed by David Lynch, who's done some other great work too. He directed Eraserhead and Dune, Blue Velvet.
Eraserhead's another one that kept showing up on those lists as a watch it once. Again, I'm familiar with it. I've never seen it. Knowing what it's about, I have no desire to watch it. But I haven't seen it, so I couldn't put it on my list.
So this movie is pretty hard to watch at times because, I mean, it's about deformity and cruelty, toward this man. People suck. Like, I mean, just, oh man. But really, I mean, the film is really about sort of discrimination and dominant groups in society and how they treat other people, that are different. And the thing is too, like, this, it's a universal film. Like, to this day, like, this idea of the freak show, we like to think of it as like, oh, that was something back in the day, back in the 1800s, in circuses behind the curtain and stuff. BS. It's still alive and well. Like, through the 90s, you had Jerry Springer. Same concepts. Even just last year, I watched a movie called The Whale. And really, the same idea is there about sort of, people's curiosity about other people that are different or kind of freaks in some way. Like, so I don't know. I I feel like this movie, it's an important film. But I think you just watch it once and you're good. You get that. The central theme about this movie, to me, is that you shouldn't judge the decisions that people make in regard to their disabilities or their differences. Because you want to judge him at the end of the movie in a way, because he takes his own life in a way by removing the pillows and stuff. But it just, I don't know. I think there's so much going on here. It's a very important movie, but I don't know. I just don't think it requires multiple viewings. It's an important film. I recommend everyone watch it, like you've mentioned on some of yours. But I think once you've seen it, you don't need to go back and watch it again. So it's a one and done for me. The Elephant Man.
And it's got Anthony Hopkins' second appearance on our list here.
Yeah, and he was good in it too. Yeah. So was Anne Bancroft. I thought she was good in that too. I remember her. Anyway, okay, your number 2 movie you only need to watch once is?
All right, I got my number 1 and my number 2 are both pretty recent. So my number 2 I'm going to go with is from 2008. It's the Darren Aronofsky film, The Wrestler. Now, you just mentioned The Whale, also directed by Aronofsky. We're going to look at The Wrestler. So this was the one that basically kickstarted, relaunched Mickey Rourke's career, if you will. Yeah. It's the story about an aging, sort of has-been, washed-up professional wrestler who is basically told early in the movie he suffers a heart attack, and the doctors are like, you'll have to stop wrestling or you're going to die. And the movie really looks at the idea of like aging and, common theme here with my last movie, The Father, with aging and the idea that for some people, there's no escape. The choices you make in your life become like a prison. You don't have options. Whether these are deliberate choices you've made, maybe these are socioeconomic things where it's beyond your control. The movie also focuses a lot on things like identity and like, who is he? Is he a wrestler? Is he a person playing a wrestler? Is he, it's an interesting look at this character who, despite the reality that he has essentially no future once he's told he can't wrestle, it starts to dawn on him like this was inevitable. He had no money, no real long-term retirement plan. He had no other job prospects. He has a part-time job in a grocery store, and it's like you see how miserable his life is in this part-time job. And even in the middle of the movie, there's like he has like what you could consider like the best possible day in retail, and he thinks, hey, if my life could be like this, I'd be fine to give up wrestling. And then the very next day is like the worst possible day in retail, and he realizes, no, not for me. It's a really interesting look at just someone who realizes they have no options, and how they choose to deal with it. And it's again, this is a tough watch, but I mean, Mickey Rourke was nominated for an Oscar for this, and he was great. It's also got Marissa Tomei giving one of her best performances.
She was really good in it too.
Yeah. I believe she was also nominated. Rachel Wood plays his daughter. She's good in this one as well. And again, Darren Aronofsky is a director that I like. He's always got an interesting perspective on how to put a film together. Again, not one you got to watch, I think, more than once. I remember, I've only seen this once. I saw it at the Toronto International Film Festival in its Canadian premiere with a live audience, and like all the performers were there, and they did a big Q&A after, and it was just like, wow. It was like just the power of this movie and the way it came across, especially on the big screen, was just amazing. But it's like you start to think about all the themes that go into it, and what's the movie trying to say, and the pitfalls and the challenges this character is going to have to go through. And yeah, it's an interesting watch to go through one time, but I think once is enough for me. Mm-hmm. So
funny enough, I actually saw that movie in the movie theater when it came out. I want to say it was like 2007, 2008, somewhere around
2008,
there. Yeah. And I remember I went to see it in the movie theater. I thought it was quite good. But same like you, that's a good one, because I have no desire to see it again. I've seen it. It was great, but I'm good. I've experienced it. It's all good. So my number two and my number one, you're both going to be surprised because they're both like not from the 70s or not even from the 80s. They're both from the 90s, late 90s too. So it's going to be a little bit of a surprise.
Wow.
Okay, my number two, I'm going with the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, good pick.
Sort of that original found footage movie, right? This definitely lacks the same impact, on a second viewing, because I saw this in the movie theater when it came out. Saw it once. I'm good. When you watch it the first time, it just feels so real. Like they weren't professional actors. It has all this grainy footage. The camera is moving all around, and there's like it changes between black and white and color because they use two different. There was a camcorder in a film. I feel like this is less of a movie and more of an experience.
Yes,
like when it came out,
describe it.
It was just a thing. Like you had to experience it, and you can only experience it once, because this movie is not just about what's on the screen. In fact, it's about what's not on the screen. It's what you don't see, right? And the ending is pretty good too. I thought it was good, but you can only get that once. Only get it once. That's it. And the thing was too, back in 1999, like most people weren't on the internet yet. So it was like, is it real? Is it fake? Everyone wasn't sure. Like it was a whole experience to see this movie, and it's not something that you can relive. I think you watch it once, you're done, you're good, especially if you saw it, in the theater or, originally in 1999, and then we're good. So that's my number two. So,
well, I remember when, like you, I saw it in the theater, and then when it came out on video, I was working at Blockbuster Video, and it was very popular. A lot of people were hearing the hype but didn't see it in the theater because it was an independent movie when it made a lot of money considering how little it cost to make it. And I can remember I'm working at the Blockbuster Video with our friend Greg Martin, who has appeared on the show before. He and I worked at Blockbuster together for years, and I'm working and he's at the cash desk to me, and a woman comes up to him and she's returning the videos from the night before, and he's like, oh, you could just put them in the chute, and she's like, whoever made this movie should be shot. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she just sort of like scowls at him like, how dare you rent this? And he goes, it's not real, right? And like the woman sort of, you could see the wheel turn in her head. She was like, it's not. Like she genuinely thought that it was this found footage that someone's like, we're going to make some money off of this by turning it into a feature film. And it's like, and she wasn't alone. We had a lot of people in the video store that, again, like you said, the internet was not really a thing. And so that was part of the success of this movie, was the fact that there was this unknown quantity about like, is this real? Is it not? Like, did these people really die? Like, what's going on? So yeah, it was, and it launched a whole genre. It was definitely an experience. So yeah, that's a great pick. I'm actually a little surprised it's not your number one. That sort of fits this category perfectly.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so what is your number one?
Okay, my number one, again, might be a little bit of a letdown after Schindler's List, that's for sure. But again, I'm not going best movie or anything like that. I'm going to go with one that just I actually kind of enjoyed. It's the movie The Road from 2009. It's based on the novel by Cormac McCarthy. It's starring Viggo Mortensen, and it's got smaller parts by Charlize Theron, Robert Duvall, Guy Pearce. It is a post-apocalyptic movie based on the post-apocalyptic book. The idea here is sort of...
I won't even watch it once.
No, of course. It's something has happened. It's alluded that it was a nuclear bomb had dropped or something. They don't really get into the specifics, but that's not what the book's about. So you don't really need it. You just need to know something happened before the start of the book, before the start of the movie. And it focuses on a man and his son who are never named. Even in the book, they just call them man and boy. And in the movie credits, it's just called man and boy. And it's their struggle for survival in a world where everything is dying, all social order has fallen apart. It's this look at survival. It's this look at the humanity of this man trying to raise his son alone in a world where there's no hope. And what's alluded to and shown more in the movie than in the book is that the child in the movie was basically born when the apocalypse was happening. So he was born into a world where he's never known anything different. And the father is trying to educate him and teach him and instill morals and values. But in some cases, the father's trying to instill the old rules in the new world. And even the boy is confused about like why he's being told or taught or asked to do things a certain way when it's clear that there's no good reason to do them that way other than that's what's familiar to the father. And through the course of this 2-hour-ish movie, they're traveling. They're trying to find some sort of relative safety. They're trying to survive. They're trying to find food and shelter and stay warm. And of course, they come across all sorts of marauders and bandits and cannibals and people who would do bad things to them to simply take what they have. And it continues to focus on the relationship between this father and his son, this struggles for hope and humanity. And I think that following the pandemic that we went through a couple of years ago, obviously it wasn't world ending like it is in this movie, but even something like that changed so much of what we took for granted. And it's, when I was doing the research on this and remembering back to it, I'm constantly finding this is happening now, where even things like in my office, well, I was working at home for years. Now they want us to go back into the office. And it's like, why? Well, because that's how we always used to do it. It's like, but haven't we demonstrated that the new way is working? And to make me go back simply because that's what used to happen, is that the right reason? And I think a movie like this, where it sort of touches on those kinds of themes, is probably even a little more relevant today after people have lived through a pandemic where, you can't always apply the old rules to today. And it's hard to get people to give up what's familiar to them, regardless of what sort of evidence you put right in front of them as to why they need to reconsider their preconceptions. The book is fantastic, but I will caution anyone who is interested in possibly picking it up. It is one long paragraph that is 300 pages, and it is very difficult to read because you don't realize how important a paragraph break is until you've got a book that is just one long paragraph. So it is a very difficult read, but it is totally worth it. The movie, not nearly as good as the book, but I think is quite good as well. But again, you only have to watch it once. It's called The Road. It's from 2009. If you have a chance, give it a watch. that's my number one pick.
All right. So you mentioned at the beginning when we were kind of laying out some parameters and rules for this, one of the things that would qualify a movie to only watch once is like a twist ending. So I'm going with, of course, the ultimate twist ending from 1999, The Sixth Sense. And for me, like I know some people have watched it over and over again to kind of try and find all the clues.
I have.
The thing is, though, the way that the ending is done, there's no need to see this movie again. Because once Bruce Willis realizes what's going on, the director actually shows you at the end of the movie, really quickly through these flashbacks, how his character misinterprets all the clues along the way. You know, like the door doesn't open because there's a small table in front of it, and the wife doesn't speak in the restaurant because she was alone, you know? So he kind of lays it all out there. So, and the thing was, this movie, when it came out, it made a boatload of money. And but Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, also came out that year. Dumbest movie ever. But so that was like the number one movie at the box office. Otherwise, this would have been. The Sixth Sense made $300 million domestically, over $670 million worldwide. But the thing was, it wasn't because people were going back to the theater to see it, you know, for 4, 5, 6 times and all that kind of thing. It was more that people were pulling other people to go see it or convincing other people to go see it. And the thing was, nobody spoiled the ending. Maybe because like the Blair Witch Project, the internet wasn't as big of a thing, you know, but nobody spoiled the ending. It was just, and it was so amazing because then, you know, you'd go to see this movie that you heard all about and you're like, I can't believe nobody gave this away. Oh my gosh. Like, why didn't they? Because they had such a reverence for it. And the way it was done, they didn't give it away, you know? And like the thing is too, if you think about it, the movie's kind of boring, you know, really, until the end when it really hits you. But I mean, it hits you hard the time when you see it. And the thing is, you can never, ever replicate that, you know? It's just, it's like, it's the experience of going through it and getting it. It's just so great. And you cannot do that a second time. So The Sixth Sense is my number one film that you can only watch once, and you only need to watch once. So.
I was going to say, it's interesting that both your number one and number two are both basically movies where the ending is what really matters.
Yeah.
And they both came out in 99. And arguably that is probably the last time pre-internet where this could have done what it did, because like you said, it would be spoiled.
Yep.
I know for both of those movies, I saw both of them on the opening weekend because at that time I was seeing every movie as it came out. Any movie I was interested in, I saw it in the first weekend. But yeah, you're right. Even a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, when people are like, have you seen The Sixth Sense? I was like, yeah, have you? They're like, not yet. I'm like, well, you should see it before, you know, you should see it. Like you don't even want to sort of allude that there's a twist ending, because if people know that something's up, then they're watching a little more closely for it. And whereas now things are spoiled. Most things are spoiled right in the trailer of the movie. Hey, this movie's come out in 6 months. Here's a trailer. It's like, thanks for showing me the last scene in the trailer. Like, why am I going to pay my money now? Like, you've spoiled. That's why I try to avoid trailers at all costs. But yeah, even I remember when like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when it was starting to like really hit its prime right before the Avengers Endgame. And there was all these things online where people were like, please don't spoil this movie. Please boycott reviews. Please boycott spoilers for at least the first week, so the people who really want to go can have a chance to go. Obviously, like I'm on a lot of nerd comic book chat sites and social media, and a lot of my followers and the people I follow, they would say, they're like, we're not going to spoil this. We're going to give you at least a week. But that was it. They were like, if you haven't seen it by the end of the first weekend, okay, now we're going to tell you who did it.
All bets are off. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that just wasn't happening in 99. It was a different time for.
Yeah.
For
I remember
so
when The Sixth Sense came out, it was out for a while and I didn't go see it in the movie theater right away. And it was like out for a couple weeks, then it went away. And then they brought it back. They kind of re-released it. And it was at that point when I was like, okay, I've heard so much, like it's so good. So I went back to see it then. And even at that point, nobody had spoiled the ending. And I was like, wow, like nobody gave this, like, what the hell? At the end of the movie, I was like, oh my God. I just remember thinking, oh, this director, he got me. My God, he got me. He wrote me in and got me. And I think that was the thing that everyone kind of put Shyamalan up on a pedestal, and he just could never relive it after that. But yeah. So for him, it was a one and done too. But anyway, what do you say on that note? We do some
fun with Caveman.
Caveman, you like to do some betting. I know you're a betting.
Do I ever?
I mean, you like betting. And one of the things in betting that we like to do is the over-under. And
Oh, nice.
the thing with the over-under is it's always really, really close. I don't know if you're like a basketball fan, but if you bet on basketball, like the over-under is like these handicappers, they're good. It's real close. So, it's like 50-50. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the year and the number one movie from that year.
Oh, boy.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the over-under for the total number of movie tickets sold. Because we're talking about movies.
Number of tickets or
number of tickets. No, we're not talking about the money that it took in.
Okay.
Because that changes over time. With inflation and stuff like that. What I want to concentrate on tonight is just how many tickets it actually sold. Because we're talking about movies you'd only see once. This is the opposite. Movies that, sold multiple times. Like, lots of people went to see it over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the year, the number one movie at the box office. I'm going to give you a number of tickets sold. And you tell me if it's over or under for that movie.
It's going to be so hard.
It's going to be hard, but we like to bet. And this is between the years, I'm going to keep it between the years of 1995 and 2005. Okay?
1995 and 2005. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll start with 1995. The number one movie was Batman Forever. I'm going to set the over-under at 40 million tickets sold. Was it over or under?
Sorry, it was Batman Forever?
Batman Forever was the number one film in 1995. 40 million tickets sold. Over or under?
It had to be under 40 million.
42 million tickets were sold for Batman Forever, believe it or not, back in 95. Okay, 1996. The number one film, as you might recall, was Independence Day.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to set the over-under at 70 million tickets.
Yeah, no,
sold.
it's got to be over. That one was a huge thing.
69 million tickets were sold.
Oh, geez.
Just under. Okay. 1997, the number one film was Men in Black.
Yep.
I'm going to set the over-under at 55 million tickets sold. Over or under?
It's got to be closer to Independence Day, so it's got to be over.
Under was 54 million tickets were sold for Men in Black.
Man, I'm 0 for 3. I'm not doing well on this.
Well, this is, again, over-under is hard, as I've always said. Okay, 1998, Titanic was the number one film that year, even though it came out at the end of 97.
Yeah.
1998 is when it made all its money. I'm going to say 100 million tickets sold. Over or under 100 million tickets sold.
It was the number one movie ever. I got to say over.
104 million tickets were sold for that movie. Okay, 1999, as I mentioned previously, dumbest movie ever, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I'll set the over-under at 85 million. Was it
definitely over.
Or under?
Over.
84 million tickets were sold for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I think once the word got out that it sucked so bad, and then people stopped going. Okay, 2000, the number one film was How the Grinch Stole Christmas, believe it or not, that year.
The Jim Carrey one?
Yeah. Number one film in 2000. 2000 was obviously not a banner year for film.
No kidding.
That crap is coming out. Back-to-back bad years, Star Wars Episode 1 and then The Grinch. So, How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 2000. I'm going to set the over-under at 45 million tickets sold. Did it sell over or under?
I really hope that's under.
47 million people went to see that stupid movie. Okay, 2001, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone was the number one film. I'm going to set the over-under at 45 million tickets.
Oh, no, that movie was huge based on the books. Got to be over.
Yep, 47 million tickets were sold for that. Okay, 2002, Spider-Man. I'm going to go high. I'm going to go 70 million tickets. Over or under?
I'm going under.
You are correct.
There we go.
You're correct. It was under 69 million. So just under. Okay, 2003, the number one film was Finding Nemo. 55 million tickets sold. Are going to make the over-under. Was it over or under that many tickets sold?
I kind of think it was more in The Grinch, so I'm going to say over.
56 million tickets were sold for Finding Nemo. 2004, Shrek 2 was the number one film. I'm going to go high on this. So I'm going to go 70 million tickets.
Wow. Well,
over or under?
I wouldn't have thought it would not be as much as the last one, but you really pumped that number. I'm going to still go under.
71 million. It's over. You went to see that one. Okay, and the last one, 2005. Oh, another beauty. Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Although I like to refer to this movie as Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the I just reverse 2 of the letters in the title. Mm-hmm. That's all. 60 million tickets. Over or under? What do you think?
I think people had a lot of hope that they were going to stick the landing, so I'm going to say over.
59 million it was under. I think people realized that it was actually Revenge of the So that's what
I only got 4 right. I got 7 wrong and 4 right.
I know. Like I say, the over-under is really hard to do when it comes to betting. So if we learn any lesson here, if you're going to bet on sports at all, stay away from the over-under because it's really hard to do. All right, so Derek, so you're worried that you didn't do very good with the over-under stuff. So I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself right now with some actual real trivia. Okay? So we're talking about movies that have sold the most tickets ever. Not the highest grossing film, but movies that have sold the most tickets. So the most people have actually gone to the movie theater to see it. I have a list of the top 25 films of all time in order that have sold the most tickets. Can you name the top 3? Or even, I know you can probably do, can you at least do the top 1? What's the number 1?
Got to be Gone with the Wind.
Correct. Gone with the Wind is the number 1 film in history with over 202 million tickets sold all the way back in 1939. Any guess what number 2 might be?
Yeah, well, I think I got the next few. I just don't know the order. I'm going to go with Wizard of Oz.
Ooh, no, the Wizard of Oz actually is quite low on the list. I don't even know if I see it on there. Nope. Wow. I'll give you a hint. It's one of my top 3 favorite films.
No, I know. I mean, okay, so coming up next, it's got to be Star Wars.
Yes. And we call it Star Wars. They've listed on here Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It's Star Wars.
1977.
Yeah, 178 million people went to the movie theater to see that.
Yeah.
And any guesses what number 3 would be? It's a little bit of a surprise. But for a period of time from 1962 until 1972, I guess it was, this film held the all-time box office.
Well, I was going to say E.T., but that's wrong then. Wow.
It was a musical.
Oh, was it Singing in the Rain?
No,
it was
after that. The hills are alive.
Sound Music. Yeah, I never would have got that.
Oh, you said it. So was The Sound of Music. Number 3, sure. 142 million people bought tickets to go see that. Rounding out the top 5, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, number 4, and Titanic was number 5.
Yeah, those were my those were my 2. That's what I said. I knew I could have got most of the top 5.
A couple ones in here were surprising. Like if I'm looking down, like number 6 was 10 Commandments.
Never would have got that.
Jaws was number 7. I get Dr. Zhivago was 8. The Exorcist was 9.
Really?
And Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs rounds out the top 10. 109 million tickets sold. Amazing. Yep. You know, the most recent one on there was right after number 11, Star Wars: The Force Awakens in 2015. So other than that, there are a lot of older like stuff. So
yeah, well, I think the way that we watch movies has changed. So those numbers are never going to. I'd be shocked if those numbers ever, if those records ever got broken. I mean, now that you can stream it, watch it on your phone, watch it on demand, own a copy for yourself. Like, people aren't going to go back to the theater again and again when they can just watch it whenever they feel like it. And that's why so many of those movies on that list are so much older.
My 3 favorite films are all on there: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, and Star Wars.
Where's Raiders?
Raiders is number 22. 88 million people.
Okay. I mean, I'm up there for at least 6 or 7 of those tickets myself.
Yeah.
I saw it a lot in the theater.
Yeah. And like I say, a couple of surprises. Like, I think The Sting was ahead of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Graduate was just after Raiders of the Lost Ark. And number 24 was Fantasia, all the way back in 1941. 83 million people.
And I want to say Fantasia, I think, was re-released in the late 90s before they did a Fantasia 2000 sequel. I think they re-released the original in the theater. So that was the case with a lot of those old movies, right? They would re-release them over and over again. And so you would get to pad those numbers.
I think maybe the biggest surprise on here is number 12 for me, 101 Dalmatians from 1961.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a surprise.
That's like way up. It's ahead of The Empire Strikes Back. Like, that's pretty crazy. A lot of people went to see it. So. Okay, next time we come back, we're going to do a movie. You want to do a movie next time? What do you think we should do?
Well, I was reaching out to my buddy Greg Martin, who I was just talking about a few minutes ago, and asked him if he'd like to come back on the show. And of course, he said, yeah, you talked me into it. No, he was pretty enthusiastic. And he suggested a movie that he and I had to watch in film class way back when. And it's the 1983, right in your wheelhouse, epic Scarface, starring Al Pacino, directed by Brian De Palma from 1983. Okay,
so I know all the old movies. This one's going to surprise you, but I have never seen Scarface.
Really?
Never seen it. Greg is going to be at me that I've never seen that movie, but that's great that he's going to join us next week. It's one of his favorite films, you're saying?
Yeah, it's definitely one of his favorite. He and I took some film classes together when we were at university, and we had to watch the original Scarface from like the 30s in black and white as a part of the curriculum. And then afterwards, he and I went out and rented this one because we're like, well, now that we watched the old one, we got to watch the new one again. So I have not seen it in quite a long time, but I'm looking forward to revisiting it. And like I said, it's one of Greg's favorite movies. It runs almost 3 hours. So if you haven't seen it, you may need to take. Actually, you know what I think? I think there's an intermission in the middle of this movie. I'm fairly certain there is, because I remember when we used to rent it on video, it was 2 video cassettes. And I think it's one of those ones where they literally have an intermission as a part of the running time. So in any case.
And it's readily available on the streamers, I think.
I think I looked, it was on like Netflix and Amazon Prime. So,
okay.
But, cool. Yeah, no, let's come back next week. We'll watch 1983 Scarface, Al Pacino. And
Greg will join us, and we'll talk all about that movie, and we'll kind of review it and go from there.
Yeah.
So I tell you what,
I was going to say, make sure your kids aren't around. This one is very hardcore. It's written by Oliver Stone, man. There's a lot of violence, a lot of swears.
I'll make sure that they don't watch it with me. I'll watch it alone. I'll tell you what, until then, I'm Chris McBrien. That's Derek Myers. And we're saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.